Luto hit me like a ton of bricks. This is a game that presents loss, trauma, and the process of working through it using abstract imagery and horror. Somewhere in that imagery and horror, I saw something in Luto that I recognized. In Luto, the protagonist Samuel sees this symbol everywhere. Two horizontal lines that I refer to as bars. He doesn't know what the bars mean or why and when he started seeing them. Naturally, what do the bars mean is one of the most common questions people ask after playing Luto. When I finished the game, I looked up what people were saying about it, and of course, many offered explanations for this symbol. I don't think I've read a single explanation I would say is wrong, but I do think pretty much every single one was missing something. That something was the other explanations. Luto's bars don't have a single simple meaning, and even if you answered what they mean, you'd be missing the why. This story is full of symbolism. From the sand to the ghosts to the chains to the weird meta stuff, spiders, coins, and of course the bars. You'd be doing Luto a disservice by treating these as riddles with singular answers. Luto's symbols aren't an extra puzzle to solve on top of the story. They are the story, woven in as opposed to added on top. So let's break down Luto and its multi-purpose metaphors. Right here, I'm going to drop a complete and total spoiler warning. I'm going to be discussing the entire plot of the game, explaining the symbolism as I go. So if you're interested in an emotionally powerful horror game with clever puzzles, complex symbolism, and incredibly creative ideas, give Luto a go, spoiler free. It's better to feel this story for yourself, and it's only around 4 hours. I'd also urge anyone to explore the symbolism yourself before you come back here. As thorough as I've been, I'm definitely missing things, so I'd love it if you would share what you found and what you think I've got wrong. And lastly, please bear in mind Luto deals with some pretty heavy topics, the absolute heaviest of which I will be avoiding here as it's somewhat separate from the main story. I'll include a list of things I think people may want to be warned about in the description, as the Steam page has left out a few things. We meet Samuel in a nightmare, a desert storm that fills the screen with a closing black border. Then we're out. The border recedes and we face a smashed mirror, surrounded with sticky notes, a nice big smile in the middle. Here we meet the narrator, a disembodied voice that describes what Samuel does and how he is feeling, adding a little context and flavour. The narrator has a few fun fourth wall breaking meta gags, which are actually a little foreshadowing for something we'll get to later. As we explore Samuel's house, we learn about where this story begins. Samuel's father has died and Samuel is in the process of packing to move out. The narrator guides us from here, telling us that Samuel gets ready to leave the house for work, and once we do, we're introduced to one of the most important symbols in Luto, the loop. Once you click the door to leave, you're instantly brought to the next day, and back in the bathroom. Time has passed, but the way forward is the same. Get your keys, and go to work again. It's clear we're not in a time loop here, although little progress is made with the packing. This is more of an emotional loop, where all Samuel can bring himself to do is follow his singular routine of getting up and going to work. That, and obsess over this strange symbol. A trip down the basement reveals a wall of notes on these bars Samuel keeps seeing. We also see the first and most obvious answer to what the symbol is, and it's these flashcards littered throughout the house, each with a Spanish word and its translation, the bars making an equals. The loop is interrupted by an ominous voice calling on the phone, instructing you not to let him do it again. This creepy voice is followed by deflection from the narrator and knocking coming from the basement. Here, Samuel is presented with a choice. Continue the loop, or head on down to the basement and confront the knocking. Of course, we're going to check out the basement, discovering a creepy trapdoor from which the banging came. Through there is where it all really begins. The space below the house and out of the loop. What I call the underhouse. From here I'm going to dial back the details on the breakdown. While I felt a closer summary of the introduction was needed, the underhouse is complicated and full of strange, interesting moments that are better experienced for yourself. I'll make sure to stop and focus on things that are important for our purpose. As we progress down the depths of Luto, we will be confronting 4 shadows, as shown here on the title screen. Each of these shadows represents a trauma in Samuel's life, a point that has brought upon these nightmares. Samuel's sketchbook reveals a life wrought with grief, as it seems he has lost every close family member aside from his mother, Ava. Those flashcards you keep finding everywhere, they're connected to Samuel's mother, as she is the one that wanted him to learn Spanish. Her letters are in Spanish, and she used the flashcards to teach Samuel and his brother. This is where the first deeper connection to the bar symbol can be drawn, as Samuel sees the equal sign everywhere, a constant reminder of his mother, and a sign that he is always thinking and worrying about her, about the possibility of losing her, just like everyone else. This is a major theme of the game, Samuel's fear of losing loved ones. With everything that's happened to him, how could he not obsess over this fear? Everywhere he looks, a reminder of his mother, a constant worry about her, personified by an equals, the symbol of cause and effect. If Samuel lost everyone else, then surely he's going to lose her too. But Samuel's mother isn't one of the 4 shadows we'll be chasing in the underhouse. The first shadow, from way back when Samuel was a child, is his brother, Isaac. Let's talk about monsters. The underhouse begins at the bottom of the ladder, beyond the hatch in the basement. It looks like a shuffled version of the house above. There's a few puzzles down here in these strange, looping rooms, and it's along with these puzzles that we are introduced to the ghosts that haunt the underhouse. The classic sheet over the head trick. If you've played enough horror games, you might even be anticipating the very familiar, most of these are just mannequins, but one of them moves. And this is sort of what happens here. This room of 4 ghosts becomes 3 as you explore the house, but the 4th ghost isn't the only one that moves. Take a closer look and you'll see they're all moving. For now, let's focus on this missing ghost. 4 becoming 3 echoes what happens to Samuel's family, as when they were both kids, Samuel's brother Isaac was lost to cancer. Exploring the underhouse for the first time, we learn a little about Samuel and Isaac's relationship. We discover Los Hermacacos, the Monkey Brothers, a pair of characters they came up with together based on themselves and the monkey toys the 2 brothers owned. We also learn of the lie Samuel's parents told him, that Isaac was sick with the flu, a lie that was not bought. Then, something strange happens, stranger than what we've seen so far. Our exploration of the underhouse is interrupted by a ghost falling from above and revealing a retro game style coin. Try to pick it up, and we're jump scared by a ghost wearing the post-it note smiley face. This thrusts us into a pitch black space where the bar symbol appears in light. If we try to move, we discover chains holding us in place. The bars of light expand, filling our vision with white, and we appear in a cave, to even the narrator's surprise.
What the hell?
A monster growls at us from somewhere else in the cave, and as we emerge, we find ourselves Back where we came from at the very first moment of the game. The desert storm from Samuel's nightmare. Our vision closes in and we return to the bathroom, back in the loop, all over again. Was that a lot? I agree. Let's break it down into what symbolism we just encountered and go from there. In order of appearance, we have the ghost, the coin, the post-it smiley, the dark room, the bars, the chains, the cave, the monster, the desert, and the loop. These symbols and more are spread out throughout the game, which means sometimes they show up in the story earlier than you'll be able to figure out what they mean. For example, the coin. This out-of-place image will have to wait until a little later to be explained. For now, all I want you to keep in mind is that this coin is what interrupted our journey through the underhouse, and ultimately led us back to the loop. We'll put the rest of the symbols aside for now too, and spend some time talking about the monster. This is perhaps the closest Luto ever comes to out-and-out explaining a metaphor. When you confront one of the four shadows in Luto, you'll hear Samuel speaking to a therapist presented as a screenplay. In the first of these screenplays, Samuel talks about how he didn't know what cancer was when they lost Isaac, that he only knew it was something very bad, like a monster. This one line is pretty illuminating for the whole of Luto. This metaphor, as simple and unambiguous as it is, provides a path to understanding and explaining more of the symbols we see, and provides a stepping stone to what I want to talk about next. The monster is not the only time we see Samuel portray his trauma as some kind of horror movie trope. It reveals to us an important part of how Samuel deals with trauma, even from a young age, that being dissociation. Now, a quick "I'm not a psychologist" disclaimer. This is just what I've researched and it only pertains to my interpretation of a video game. But I believe, after Isaac's death, Samuel begins dissociating, a common response to trauma. As we return to the loop, everything is as it was. The basement hatch is now covered, and we continue the routine of picking up the keys and going to work. Except a strange screenplay can be found in the hallway, detailing the events the player is performing. This is how Samuel's dissociation is presented, by Samuel seeing his life as a movie. Cinema is something we quickly discover as a passion of Samuel's, so it's a natural escape. In one of Samuel's drawings, we see him as a child cutting out 2 black strips and sticking them to his glasses. Another drawing depicts him wearing those glasses and smiling. The glasses creating 2 black bars in Samuel's vision. The same black bars we've had on screen for the entire game so far. Cinematic bars. Samuel also appears to have stuck these bars on his drawing of his and Isaac's monkeys. He creates a barrier between himself and reality, viewing his life as if it's cinema. It's not real. This is how he copes. According to the YouTube videos of Luto's soundtrack, this is a story exploring the stages of grief. And this would, in some way, be the first stage: denial. As we progress the loop, we discover Samuel's childhood bedroom. We see more evidence of Samuel's love of movies. And based on the posters on his wall and Night of the Living Dead playing on TV, he especially likes horror. So, the monsters, the ghosts, and later on, the spiders, are a way for Samuel to take his real-life trauma and separate it from reality. Picture it as a fictional threat, presented by fantastical horror movie tropes, instead of the terrifyingly ordinary horrors they really are. As we leave Samuel's bedroom, the horror intensifies. The world starts to break, the game starts to melt, and the narrator declares, "It is night." We are given a torch, and we exit the loop via a dark, concrete tunnel that's appeared through the front door. The tunnel leads back to the cave. The unseen monster growls close by, and we return back to the underhouse, back to where the ghosts are, back to where things are scarier. The sinister voice from the phone encourages us to doubt the narrator and tells us in order to escape, we have to go back, even if it hurts. Doors slam around us. The narrator encourages us to stop resisting and let everything go back to normal. But of course we persist. Through the doors slamming and the cinematic bars closing in, we frantically search the underhouse until we find the first shadow. The shadow turns to light. A face appears in the bars, and we see the screenplay from Samuel's therapy, as Samuel himself tells the story we talked about earlier.
A long time ago.
Isaac's cancer, Samuel's monster. It's after this when the narrator really voices his displeasure. He pauses the game, tells us to stop, and closes out. I mean, really closes out of the game. And that is the first shadow confronted. Isaac's shadow. When we load the game back up, we return to the desert, and with one shadow now turned to light, we last a little longer against the storm. But inevitably, we wake, back in the loop. This loop, the house is wrong. The staircase keeps going down, deep beneath the earth. And as we reach the bottom, we see the rest of the house is no longer there. Instead, there is the underhouse. We explore this new underhouse, darker and creepier than before. Rocks and sand encroach on the interior. Samuel's nightmares are bleeding into the underhouse. Which begs the question, what is the desert? What is the underhouse? And are they both nightmares? The answer to that last question is a simple no. As strange as it may seem, I don't think the underhouse is a nightmare. I'll explain what I think it is later. The desert is a nightmare. At least, that's how it's described by the narrator. But I think that means more than just what Samuel sees in his sleep. It's notable that the entire game is set in an interior space, the one exception being the desert. And I believe this is intentional. It's why, in the loop, we don't see the front door open even a little. Because this is what the world outside feels like to Samuel. A desert, a depressing, oppressive wasteland. And the desert isn't just the physical space outside of the door, but the very concept of the world, of everything outside of the routine. And it's become harsh and difficult to bear. We see a painting on the wall of Samuel's house, a painting of a beach. On this painting is a sticky note, which, like the other sticky notes, is from Samuel's father. It says, "Someday we'll be back. I promise." A note from Samuel's mother reveals that this painting meant a lot to Samuel. And it may be a literal place that Samuel and his family once visited, but I think it also represents a version of the world that is joyful and warm. It represents the potential of what could be out there when you venture outside or out of the routine. But this painting is replaced with a similar painting, depicting the desert instead. Samuel can no longer feel the potential of a joyful world outside. Now the outside is just dry and lifeless. Through this chapter, the second shadow, we see what the loss of Isaac did to Samuel, how it took something away from inside him. The second of the four shadows is Samuel himself. Or rather, the part of him that died after Isaac, that being his dreams. This is quite explicitly stated when we come across the House of Lost Dreams. This is a puzzle section which features 4 symbols of lost dreams: Isaac's, Ava's, Joel's, and of course, Samuel's. Isaac's symbol is a deflated basketball. We see that he played basketball before he became ill. Ava's is a torn-up family photo, as it's implied that she and Joel split up, presumably when Samuel was still a child, meaning between that and the loss of Isaac, her family was destroyed. Joel's is a dull heart, something we'll cover later. And then Samuel. His symbol is the pair of glasses with the bars stuck to them. We know these as the symbol of the dissociative state Samuel went into after Isaac's death. This state may have killed his enthusiasm for his dreams. As we see throughout Luto, Samuel was passionate about film, and clearly had dreams to become a writer. We see a screenplay he worked on for a film called Restart, and we hear of multiple other screenplays he drafted and threw away, which his mother found and kept for him. These cinematic bars are a guilty feeling that he abandoned his passion, and they're always somewhere on Samuel's mind as the symbol he just can't stop seeing. Those glasses being in the House of Lost Dreams suggest that to Samuel, his dream isn't just abandoned, it's dead, as irreversibly gone as his brother, his father, his family. There is a piece missing for the second shadow. In this section's screenplay, it's hinted that what we're hearing isn't the full story. However, right now, I do have to draw a line. Luto has a very well hidden secret chapter, Chapter X, found by solving a series of cryptic riddles that required a community effort to work out. I'm already treading quite lightly with the subject matter of Luto, because I know how dangerous it can be to be flippant about these sorts of topics. So I've made the decision to not cover Chapter X at all. Chapter X involves an extremely sensitive topic, and if you want to know what it is, I recommend looking it up for yourself. But be warned, it's heavier and darker than anything else in Luto. Thankfully, knowing the contents of Chapter X is not necessary for my explanation of Luto's symbolism. It's actually pretty straightforward. All you really need to know is that in his adulthood, Samuel had a traumatic experience that once again broke him, that I think was responsible for killing what was left of his dreams. This, like the other shadows, is a trauma that Samuel blames himself for, even though it isn't his fault. So, with the second shadow confronted, we return to the loop. Once again, the house is creepier than before, and here the only way to progress is to go back on yourself, rather than continue through the loop. A walk through a waterlogged version of the house with false exits and intrusive thoughts floating in the air leads us to another interruption by the smiley-faced ghost. This takes us back to the dark room where we're chained up, looking at the symbol in the form of bright light. Then we return to the house. But it's not the loop, it's a section from earlier in the game. Luto is, as described on its Steam page, a story of someone unable to leave their home. Samuel is trapped, whether mentally or physically, in this space. The world outside has become desolate. He is trapped by his trauma for these awful things that have happened to him throughout his life, for which he feels a deep guilt. This explains the chains that bind him in the dark room. A dark room with 2 thin slits of light, like a cell. A little later, when we get closer to this light, we see that if you get close enough, the white bars just become the black bars again. During the reading of the screenplays, within the eyes of the face we see, is the reflection of two white bars. This symbol Samuel is always seeing is him looking at the blinding light of outside from within his solitary confinement. Another reason why we never see the outside, save for Samuel's nightmares. Why our only option is to delve deeper into the underhouse, where the horror increases. Samuel can't really see the outside, because his guilt keeps him locked in. Back in the underhouse, footsteps echo just out of sight. Ghosts wait on every corner. A red room with letters scrawled on the wall presents us with a game of hangman that we play through a CRT TV. I think it's time to talk about why Luto is a horror game. Horror generally doesn't need a reason to be horror. A lot of horror media is horror simply because that's what it is. Luto, however, has to be a horror game. This story of grief was told this way for a reason, and it's all to do with the loop. Processing trauma can be difficult, uncomfortable, painful. Through Samuel's dissociative state and his loop, he can avoid the pain of confronting his traumatic experiences. In the narrator's own words,
"Routine was not a prison. It was a refuge."
So when Samuel leaves the refuge of the routine, things get painful. This pain is personified by the horror in Luto. As Samuel faces his trauma, it intensifies as he digs deeper into old wounds. The horror is more than just a metaphor. It allows the player to feel a little of what Samuel feels. It allows them to feel that breaking out of the loop is uncomfortable by making it actually uncomfortable. Think back to that first go around the loop. The pattern of forever grabbing the keys and going to the door over and over isn't scary at all. But what's going on in the basement is. We have a choice. We can ignore the horror and stay in our comfortable, safe loop, or we can confront it and face the unease and fear. Leaving the loop is uncomfortable and scary, but it is also the only way to make progress. But just a note here, don't take this as instruction on how you should deal with trauma. I do believe this is what the game is saying about Samuel in particular, but each person, situation, and trauma is different. I'm not a doctor, I'm just some person who put a lot of time researching a topic for a video as best I could. Truth be told, Luto isn't as cleanly divided into sections as I'm trying to make it seem. This hangman puzzle here uses elements from the previous and the next shadows. Luto's story bleeds together, it tangles up, it paints with all of its colors at the same time. I want to keep Luto's symbols nice and organized, but they really jumble together. This section, the third shadow, it's supposed to be about Samuel's childhood into adulthood dog, Mr. Button. But it just won't stay about Mr. Button. That does make sense though, as Mr. Button was brought into the family after Isaac's death, and Samuel couldn't help but view him as a replacement for Isaac. He reminded him of Isaac, and was Samuel's rock in the trauma that followed Isaac's death. I don't think Mr. Button met an unusual end for a dog. It's likely that it's the common tale of people only having so much time with their pets. But the role Mr. Button took on in Samuel's world turned his loss from a sad but expected fact of life into one more trauma. A trauma Samuel now faces in the underhouse. With one shadow left to confront, the underhouse is broken. Samuel has come far to face his trauma, but that couldn't be done without opening old wounds, and the house reflects this painful, open state. Luto has a few meta moments early on. The narrator in particular seems to be aware of the player.
Sam starts running.
But now it breaks down entirely. Dev notes appear on screen, Unreal Engine triggers become visible, and the audio shuts down completely. This world is shattering in a way far beyond rocks and sand creeping inside. Within this broken world, we look closer at what happened to Samuel's father, Joel. When the game breaks entirely, we're kicked back to the main menu, where the game assets are deleted bit by bit. When we finally get back in, we're met with something completely new. The bars are no longer cinematic, but instead they are at the sides of the screen, turning the game's aspect ratio into 3:4. And the Unreal Engine game we were in a moment ago is now a low-poly, early 3D style Pac-Man game set in a hospital filled with spiders and blood. Our goal being to collect anatomically correct hearts. This game is called 3003, the date of Joel's death. It's Samuel replaying the events of his father's death, the way the hospital felt, the way the heart attack came upon them as a sudden horror, like a spider silently creeping up the wall. If Luto is tackling the stages of grief, then this is bargaining. We hear from Samuel that he wonders what would have happened if he had acted faster.
Maybe it was my fault.
When you fail in 3003, you're offered a retry. You have as many of these as you have coins collected throughout the game. I see these coins as a representation of Samuel getting pulled away from facing his trauma, sidetracked by a what-if scenario. What if I'd done this instead? What if I could just try again? He's taken off course from his progress by thoughts of retrying 3003. You see, win or lose in 3003, the outcome is the same. You move on to the rest of Luto. This was just a scenario Samuel was replaying in his head that ultimately didn't change anything. Because Joel's death already happened. Replaying the memory just gets in the way of Samuel's progress. The time he spends imagining what he could have done different is time spent not making progress. And that goes for the player, too. The strongest evidence I have for this interpretation is the fact that when you lose at 3003, you can actually choose to not retry. And that gives you the same result as persisting and winning. You get to move on to the rest of the story without replaying 3003 over and over. Does 3003 feel like a big waste of time where the story isn't moving? That's because it is. Because the right choice is to stop replaying this moment over and over. It won't change the outcome. We emerge back into this broken meta mess, and things well and truly go off the rails as we find ourselves in the dev area of the game of Luto. We're deep inside now as we venture as far into Samuel's trauma as we can possibly go, underneath the underhouse, into the developer's testing area. But I think there's another way to look at the meta theme in Luto, as well as being about digging deep. As Samuel works through his trauma, he dismantles the image of the world he'd built up in his head. The world had become full of monsters. It had become a place of fear, where horrors lurked both in and out of the dark. But that was Samuel not seeing things as they really were. That was Samuel's twisted, false version of reality. The horrible things that happened to him are a series of cause and effect, like these triggers. But they're not monsters. They aren't ghosts. Ghosts aren't real. Or maybe it is just about digging deeper into Samuel's psyche. Maybe I'm overthinking it. It feels right, but now that I've dissected and categorized everything into symbols, they just feel like tenuous. Like they don't really connect as cleanly as I'm trying to make them. These symbols aren't really meant to be picked apart into a nice, organized list. That's the problem. They're meant to be woven together. As fun as it is to solve the metaphors, they're supposed to be felt more so than understood. That is the whole point of Luto. You can see it in the type of symbolism used. Monsters are metaphors for things that are scary, a game loop as a metaphor for a depressive routine, meta for the reality that Samuel is finally seeing. These are feelings. The spider isn't a metaphor for a heart attack because it looks like arteries or because it's got a venomous bite. It's because that's what his father's heart attack felt like to Samuel. It's likely, or pretty much guaranteed, that some of my interpretations aren't what was intended. But they ended up that way because I favoured how these symbols feel over what logic they follow. This leads me to my last explanation. Another meaning behind the black bars that, right or wrong, I am sure of, because I felt it. This is where I get personal, so brace yourself for that, because this next bit is why Luto means so much to me. A while back, much like Samuel, I found myself in a comfortable but depressed routine as a result of a string of bad things that happened. I'm going to be upfront and say it's nothing on the level Samuel experienced, but it was enough that Luto spoke to me in some small way. I worked hard to make it through those things, work that is always ongoing. And about a year ago, I made it out of the rut. Things got a lot better. This isn't a sad story, it's a happy one. Something bizarre happened to me in that time as I went for a walk to the bay that I've been to many times before and asked a really strange question to my wife. Have all those houses always been there? To which the answer was yes, of course. That's an entire town over there on the other side of the bay. But for some reason I just hadn't noticed it before. See, the way I described this period, this coming out of the rut, was like there had been a vignette in my head for a long time, stopping me from seeing everything. A sort of tunnel vision. Then, all of a sudden, it was lifted. I could see everything now. I could feel it. So, at the end of Luto, once you place the last shadow to rest and finish working through the trauma, Samuel faces the bathroom where the loop usually begins. Only this time, for the first time in the game, Samuel has a body. He has a reflection. And now, the bars are gone. The full view is released, and Samuel can see everything. He heads for the front door, and for the first time, we see the light of the outside for real. And it's that moment, more than any other, which is why this game means so much to me. I didn't have to analyze or research what it meant. I felt it personally. I had a genuine connection to it. So if any of my explanations here read untrue to you, then actually that's great, because your interpretation means a lot more than mine to you, because it's how you connected with the game. That's really what I want to say while trying to balance celebrating Luto and its incredible tapestry of symbolism. That you shouldn't get tunnel vision trying to pick apart everything you see to come up with a concrete answer. Just experience it and feel it. Come up with the answer based on what feels right, and you'll connect with the story as you do it. I'll leave you with one final metaphor, but this one I'm not going to explain. I believe you have the pieces you need to feel it for yourself. At the end of the game, just before we return to the house for the last time, we come back to the desert. Only this time, it's not a desert. There's water, and standing at the water is one of the ghosts. the one with the smiley face.